For the single folks, young and old, can we have a little chat about the biblical stance on self-pleasure, any possible effects on a future marriage, and whether self-pleasure is ever acceptable within the covenant of marriage? There's a couple questions in there. So,
It's a single person?
single folks, young and old, can we have a little chat about the biblical stance
Can we have a little chat?
on self-pleasure?
Let's have a little chat.
Possible effects on a future marriage?
Take the kids out of the room if you're listening to this.
Yes.
On a road trip. This is where you hit pause.
There you go.
Okay. So it's a single person. I'm just rephrasing the question.
Sounds like it.
It's a single person asking if they can participate or engage in masturbation.
That's the, yeah.
Is that the question?
I think that's the ask.
Okay. So,
And the Bible, the biblical stance on it and any possible effects on a future marriage. And then whether it's okay in the covenant of marriage.
okay. There's like 4 questions there. Okay. So let's take the single person who is not married asking
Yes.
if they can participate in
Yes.
masturbation. So, there's no Bible verse that we would turn to and say,
Right.
3 Corinthians
Right.
17:4,
Yeah.
thou shalt not self-pleasure. But what we do have is principles to work with in terms of
Right.
lust, in terms of what we do with our mind. And what I have told many single people is sex is a gift that you're saving to share with a spouse if marriage comes one day.
Yes.
Therefore, when it's only one-sided, it's not being used as God intended. So for a single person, what I would tell them, or what I do tell them is, in order for you to experience the full release that masturbation is intended to accomplish, you have to engage your mind. It's not just a physical act, it's a mental act. In engaging your mind, for a married couple, they can be thinking about their spouse.
Right.
For a single person, who or what are you thinking about?
Right.
And so that's where pornography comes into play.
Yes.
And that's the purpose of pornography. Pornography does not exist to admire the physical beauty of different female specimens around the globe.
Yeah.
Pornography exists for dudes to get off.
Right.
Like, that's what it exists for. And so now you're using and objectifying God's daughters. Some men, every girl that you look at is the daughter of some man out there. She's a sister. In some situations, maybe she's even a spouse, which is very twisted and perverted. But there's no question she's being abused and exploited. No matter how empowered she thinks it makes her feel, she's being abused and exploited for men to objectify her, and to participate in that is I think, a rank and perverse sin and an abuse of a man's power. So what I tell single people is, I don't see a scenario where you're going to be self-pleasuring yourself and not engaging in lust and fantasy, which is not saying you well up for marriage, by the way.
Right.
Because when you get into marriage, it's not like you're going to just like all of a sudden become this self-controlled person.
That's right.
And so exercising self-control while you're single is what actually prepares you to be married. Because after you get married, we got married, I was like, oh, I can have sex now, and I have no more sexual temptations. Actually, in some ways, so for me, who I was raised in a strong Christian home, never did the pornography, masturbation thing. Lord was very gracious and kind. And so if you awaken that stuff, it's really hard to put it back to bed.
Right.
So let that dragon lie. If you wake it up, it could devour you. So by God's grace, I kept that waking giant asleep. Then we got married, and it wakes up. What I found was sexual temptation actually in some ways got stronger, not weaker, because now I have more information and more knowledge about how this works. And wow, this is so. Had I not practiced the discipline of self-control before marriage, there's no prayer apart from a miracle of God that you're going to exercise self-control after marriage. So you prepare for a life of healthy, wonderful, fire in the fireplace sex with your spouse by exercising God-given and God-empowered self-control before marriage, because you're going to need self-control after marriage as well. So that's how I'd answer that question. Anything to add to that I've missed?
No, I'm still thinking, but I thought that was, that's good.
Now, if you've been engaged in that, right, and you're like, well, now what do I do? It's like, oh, hey, ask the Lord for forgiveness, confess to a brother or sister if it's a man or a woman, because we're finding out that pornography is becoming more and more an issue with women as well.
Yeah.
So the world says indulge the self, fulfill the desires of the flesh, let her rip, and the Bible says just the opposite: die to yourself.
Yeah.
Don't fulfill the desires of your flesh, because the flesh leads to death. And so it's not that the desires for sex are wrong, but when you're fulfilling the fleshly desires of temptation and lust, not good.
So what would you say to somebody that says, well, yeah, but it's not really sex? Like, so I'm not really having sex outside of the marriage because it's just me by myself.
They're stupid.
Okay.
They're clueless. They're foolish. They're being demonically influenced. They're following the flesh. They're trying to defend evil. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
I've had those conversations.
Well, that's why I'm asking,
like,
because we've heard that question before. They're saying, well, I'm not having sexual intercourse, so why is this wrong?
Yeah, and I don't like arguing with people like that because they're not wanting an answer.
Right.
They're trying to defend their sin. They're trying
Yes.
to find a loophole for them to feel good about easing their conscience. That's causing the question to come up. It's like, well, why are you even asking the question? Well, because my conscience is being pricked that this is wrong.
Yes.
And so now I want you to defend it, or I want you to give me an excuse so I can excuse it, or I want to prove a point here and get off on a technicality so I can keep living in sin. I'm like, I didn't want to like talking to those kind of people.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, keep going, hope it works out for you. You can talk with Jesus about it when you see him.
Right.
You know, it's like, and here's part of the question that I get frustrated with young men. It's like, the question is, how far can I go?
Right.
Not how pure can I stay?
Yes.
So like, if you're constantly trying to push the line and like, how far, is this okay? Was this okay? Can I get off on this technicality? It's the wrong orientation of the
That's
question.
right.
Your heart is, how pure can I walk before God? How righteously can I live? How, you know, you're pushing into holiness.
Yes.
You're not trying to skirt the line of like flesh-driven, demonic-inspired perversion and evil and lust, and to see how far you can go without burning yourself. Well, if you're playing with fire, like you're already going to hurt yourself and other people. So
well, and practicing that desire for purity and holiness and self-discipline and self-control before marriage, guess what? That'll benefit you when you are married.
Yeah.
Like you said, because it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
There still needs to be a pureness. There still needs to be a desire for holiness when you're married.
Yeah.
That doesn't change. That's part of being a person.
Yeah.
A Christian. That's part of following Jesus, is wanting to live a life of purity, whatever that looks like. So if you're not married, that means you're not doing these things. That means you're not committing these sins in your mind, etc. So that when you get married, you still have that great desire for purity and holiness, which isn't just a physical thing, right? It's a heart thing. Purity is a heart issue. So it's like, oh man,
Yeah. So in relationship to being married, masturbation in marriage.
Yeah, that was the last part of the question.
So I'm not, if they mean like being masturbated by their spouse or masturbating themselves. So I'm not sure what the question is.
Not sure how to answer that one exactly.
But I guess what I would say is like we've talked with some couples who like the husband travels a lot, and when he's away, like he and the wife connect on the phone, or she sends pictures, or boy, FaceTime is all sorts of ways to redeem that technology. And they do that, and there's some self-pleasuring involved, and it's like, I'm like, okay, I got no problem with that, whatever. So I wouldn't come down hard on that. I'd just be like, nah. I would just be like, hey, man, if you're a soldier and you're gone for 6 months, man, whatever you and your wife can figure out to make it work, that's outstanding.
Yeah.
But as a rule, as a practice, like we've never done that. That's not something that we want to get, because I want to be with you.
Right.
And so if I'm going to be away for a season of time, like we're going to make sure our tanks are full before we leave. And then I'm going to exercise a joy-filled sense of self-discipline and self-control while I'm gone in anticipation of being home with my wife.
Yeah.
And so that's how we've gone about it. If you got a different scenario where you're like, your husband's gone every week, all year long because he's working, you got to work some stuff out. That's outstanding.
Yeah.
I've just never wanted to get in the habit personally of gratifying sexual desires without you there. Now, when we're together, it's game on. Like you know, wheels come off, rules go out the door, and it's like if we're together, boy, let's have fun.
Right.
But I've just never liked the idea of gratifying sexual desires when you're not there, and so we just never done it.
Yeah.
But I think it could be done in a responsible, godly way that's protecting the marriage.
Yeah.
But it would need, I think, some pretty strong boundaries.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
lots of
Because it could go from like
conversation.
Okay, a husband's masturbating with his wife on the phone, to a husband's masturbating to pictures of his wife on his phone, to a husband's masturbating with just pictures of any woman.
Yeah.
And then it's off the rails.
Yeah.
And so I think there would need to be some caveats and cautions given with that practice if it was going to be regular.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, if you enjoyed that clip, you can click here to listen to the full podcast, or click in the link below and go wherever you listen to podcasts. And we're here, we're there, we're everywhere. Hopefully you can find us. And if you'd like some more free resources, you can head to StrongerManNation.com.